Hello, Scrappy Peeps. Suzanna here today for SpiegelMom Scraps, and I am here to share with you my first of 3 layouts for the month of April. This is the layout. The theme over at SpiegelMom Scraps, actually, let me get back to that. These are the sequences that I used, and if you shop at the store and you find anything you like and you use Suzanna 15, you get 15% off. I used 3 different mixes. I used Southern Bluebells, Summer Paradise, and Just Because, which is pink. And so the theme over at SpiegelMom Scraps this month is flowers and repurposed packaging. So I'm using this collection from Pretty Little Studio, and it's called Tales and Dreams, and I chose 3 primary colors, or 3 colors from the collection. I focused on the pink, the yellow, and the blue there. And I created my own flower cut file, which is what those flowers are there. And I used a pattern paper to cut those out. And then I had some of the die cuts from the Pretty Little Studio collection, and they had a pink flower and a blue flower, and I wanted to complement that. So that's why I chose the 3 colors that sequence mix colors that I chose, because they complemented those 3 colors. But I wanted a few more flowers. So in a little bit, you'll see how I use some pasties from shimmers that I got from the SpiegelMom Scrap store, and I created 2 additional flowers. I'll just show you the process of one of them, but it's the exact same process for 2. Now, as I'm wanting to do, I decided that I needed a little bit more than just the Pretty Little Studio stuff and my SpiegelMom Scraps goodies. And so you can see that flower that I pulled out from Amy Tangerine, and then there's a couple of other things that I'm going to throw in there. Now, I wanted to add a little extra color behind the flowers. I like the flowers on the white, but I'm kind of into my mixed media these days, and so I've got these Jane Davenport watercolors, and I'm going to speed through this because basically it's just finding the right hue of pink and yellow and adding some water to that, and then just putting it down directly on the white cardstock. I have not primed this with gesso. I'm not one to want to wait for the gesso to dry, so I usually just go straight down on paper. So I'm using the yellow here, and I'm just roughly guesstimating where the outlines of this flower is. I actually want a little bit of the paint to go outside of the flower, I don't mind that the pink bleeds in with the yellow. It kind of adds to the effect for me. And then I'm going to water down some of this sky blue and also paint behind that blue flower as well. And I just like the way that it enhances the flower and sort of fills in behind the electronic digital die cut that I've created there. I'm going to use a little bit of the extra blue and splatter some watercolor splatters behind. So you can see I've got that blue die cut from Pretty Little Studio that I'm using as my guide for how I want to create this flower. So this is the Baby Boy Blue pasties from shimmers that I got from the SpiegelMom Scrap store, and literally all I'm doing is I'm just going to create some petals. And I love the way that the brush leaves texture in the flower, and just it adds some dimension to these flowers. I love the flowers from Pretty Little Studio, but you can't get dimension really when you've got that 2D structure. So the nice thing about this pasties is that I have that 3D there. While the pasties is drying, I'm going to go ahead and adhere these flowers down on top of the watercolor. And I want in the center of that flower to have a little bit of a darker blob or a different color. And so I'm just kind of generically cutting out another flower, an innard to the flower from a darker piece of cardstock, and then I'm going to put 4 or 5 little white sequins on top, and they mimic the white circles that are in the die cut flowers from Pretty Little Studio. And when you look at the close-ups, you'll see what I'm talking about. These are 4x6 pocket cards from Cocoa Daisy, and I'm just going to use them to back the photo. And I like the way that the yellow on the top right and then the pink on the bottom left mimic the diagonal that's in the layout, which is why I chose to back the photo with that. And then later in the layout construction process, you'll see how I use the packaging, which has all of the colors in the Pretty Little Studio collection in stripes going across it, and it just adds a little bit more color and another layer behind the photos. So I cut that flower in half. I like the way that that flower from Amy Tan with the darker navy just incorporates just a little bit more of the color of one of the girls' dress into the layout there. And then I'm going to use my Scotch Quick Dry to glue these flowers down, and I alternate between my Scotch Quick Dry and a Scrapbook Adhesives 3L roller adhesive as well. So that other yellow flower that I just put down is the other flower that I created using the pasties from Shimmers, which I got from the SpiegelMom Scrap store. And again, if you use the code Suzanna15, Suzanna with a Z, you can get 15% off. The process that I did was exactly the same as I've done for that blue flower there that I'm about to fussy cut out. I just did it with a yellow pasties and a yellow cardstock in the center there. I do have some of the floral bits from the Pretty Little Studio collection, and I use those just for some little extra foliage and color amongst the flowers there. I did leave a white border on the outside of both the yellow and this blue flower because I'm mimicking the die cuts that I got in the collection, and they have a white border around them too. It also, when you're using mixed media, just makes it much easier to get a defined clean edge rather than what could be a rather messy edge because of the paintbrush marks. So there's the flower that looks just like that blue one that's from the die cuts. I'm going to glue down the darker center and then put in a few of the white sequins that I'm going to get from that the Bluebell collection sequence mix there. So I'm just playing with the placement and the alignment of those. I want a balance between the pink, the yellow, and the blues, and I want the weight to move because there's a lot of dark in the picture. I like the way that those lighter colors have sort of lightened up that page for me. And I changed the balance of those flowers because I just like the heavier flower up the top with those bigger flowers and that lighter flower, the smaller flower, which is the actual die cut, to come down. So now I'm going to dig through these different three different sequence packages, and I'm going to pull out the colors that I want. What I like about all three of these particular sequence mixes is that they have flower sequins in them, which is complementary to the flowers that I actually used on the layout. I often pull apart sequence mixes and just choose the particular bits that I wanted. And again, in the close-ups, you'll see how that turns out. There's no reason I couldn't have used the actual mix itself, but I wanted a sprinkling of pink, blue, and yellow in amongst the page and didn't want it to be too heavy, which is why I just chose a few of each. So now I'm going into the Summer Paradise, which is the yellow collection there, and just putting a sprinkling of yellow along the page. In a minute, I'm going to fast forward this because literally all I'm doing is I'm taking my Scotch Quick Dry adhesive and I'm going to adhere everything down to the page. I've laid it all out, and I'm going to put those pieces, those flowers down, as well as the sequins and the sequence flowers. It goes pretty quickly. It's just a lot of work because there's a lot of pieces in that. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and embellish the layout a little bit more. There's already a lot on it, but I really wanted to sprinkle some mist in there for a little bit of added organic sort of texture and feel to the layout. And then I found a few other embellishment pieces that I was going to add as well. So there is a cut apart that I'm going to use, and the phrase that I chose that is going to overlap the bottom left-hand corner of that picture just says Happy Days. This picture is of my daughter and the 4 girls that she went to cotillion with. Cotillion is something that we do down here in the northern South, the northern edge of the southern part of the country, southeastern part of the country. Sixth graders do this, and she had such a blast that she convinced all 3 of the other girls to go back next year as 7th graders. This was their last dance. So I also have the hearts from the Pretty Little Studio collection, and I'm going to scatter a few of those throughout. And again, I'm going to try and choose the pink, the yellow, and the blues, just to be consistent with the color palette that I'm using across this page. Some of it is to really just fill in the holes. Earlier I referenced how I was going to use the packaging. I feel like the borders of these photos, or of the photo, is rather distinct amongst this flower cluster, and so I felt that by using the lines on a north-south direction, I was able to soften the lines of that and break it up a little bit. But I wasn't sure about how I was going to use them, which is why I sort of flip it around a little bit. I'm just going to use my scissors to cut off a strip and insert that in there, and you can see how with the subtle color it just sort of softens that up. Trim that off, and I'm just going to stick a little bit of glue behind it, but I wanted to check the bottom strip too, just to see how that balance was going to work and whether I was going to use both strips or just one. Put my glue pen and adhere that down. I could have put my Scotch Quick Dry behind it to get it down, but sometimes the glue seeps out, and that's why I like my blue glue pen for those fine details in there. That's the bulk of the page, really. I'm going to cover my photo and use some more shimmers. This is Ruby Red, and put a little bit of pink in there, and again it just adds to the organic feel. It's almost like confetti too in a way, and kind of adds to the festivity of the layout. And then this is Jenny B Blue, and you know with shimmers you don't really shake it, you roll it between your hands and just add a little bit of that Jenny B Blue, which is the same basic color as the blue that I've used in the flowers there, as well as the die cut. And you'll see that mixed media work a little better in the close-ups. So now it's time to add the title to the layout. I really loved this Yay from Maggie Holmes, and I thought that was it adds to the celebratory feel of the layout. And then I have these yellow letter stickers, again from Pretty Little Studio, and I'm going to put in Dance Day. In this video, I have the word stacked. I have dance on top and day underneath. I don't like the weight of that, and so I'm going to move day outside of the Y to the right-hand side, and I will do that off camera. With these little letters, I like to use my tweezers. It just makes it easier for my fat fingers to get into those tiny spaces that I want them to be. So that, my friends, after I put some word stickers, is going to wrap up this layout. I strangely don't do a thumbs up at the end of this, but I am totally pleased with the way this turns out. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any comments, please don't hesitate to leave them in the box down below. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I hope you're doing well. Take care.